Welcome to the webinar, and we will be starting in about 1 minute. Welcome to today's webinar on the new realities of price pressure and selling value. We will be getting started in about 30 seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual Happy Half Hour. It is our 9th weekly session, and I'm Michelle Richardson, joined by Russ Scherer, coming to you from North Carolina and our Sales Performance Research Center, and Russ is our Director of Facilitation and Coaching Excellence, coming to you from California. And today we're joined by our producer, Nicole. She's providing tech support, so please reach out to her if you're having any connection issues. She'll also be posting some helpful links and reference information throughout today's session. Today's webinar will be recorded and sent to all the participants. You can find our previous recordings. This is a weekly session, and so we have the previous webinars recorded and posted on our website. That's thebrooksgroup.com. You can navigate to the resources tab and the virtual Happy Half Hour landing page. Today's topic is the new realities of price pressure and selling value. And while price pressure is certainly not a new concept in sales, the sales leaders that we're hearing from now are telling us that it is, in fact, a new reality. Certainly the sales results that we've been sharing over the past 9 weeks would indicate things like tight budgets, difficulty collecting, and many industries are negatively impacted by stay-at-home orders. So we know that companies are really scrutinizing their expenses. I spoke with one client recently who even said their most loyal clients are asking for price concessions, and all agreements are being put out for multiple bids automatically. And we also know that for many organizations, especially in the travel industry, you all are being asked to cut your prices, but you're also even undertaking more expenses as it relates to new safety regulations and cleaning rooms and the PPE and everything else. So we know that there's a push and pull between cutting prices and maintaining your profitability and margins. These are the types of conversations that we are having on a weekly basis in our sales leader forums. The Brooks Sales Leadership Forum is a great opportunity for peers to get together. I am very, very fortunate to be able to host and moderate one. I know, Russ, you are as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, we've been talking about these for a few weeks. And again, just to encourage everyone, these are weekly get-togethers for an hour, usually a small group of about 8 of your peers who are sales leaders to talk about the real-time challenges they're facing. Some of the things we talked about last week, the challenges they're having with their sales teams, more senior reps who are challenged by digital, wondering what kind of retraining they need to do to get outside reps comfortable working inside. We also had some conversations about how do you interview and how do you onboard in this new virtual world. So if these or other sales questions that you come across during the week, you think I could really use some help with these, the forums are free to join. Just email us at forum@thebrooksgroup.com. Nicole, perfect, has got that email address out there. We would love to get you into a group. New groups are starting every week, and they are of very high value. Anyway, let's move on to our topic for today. Pricing, even in good times, is a large issue. The idea around value selling, or how do we hold gross margin, is one of the most requested issues we have when I work with clients. And so today we're going to talk about some best practices. We're going to talk about just the dynamics of virtual negotiation, and then share with you some ideas about how to really capture and sell the value that you bring. But first, let's take a look at the data that we got this week from our weekly survey.
Thanks, Russ. As we have said, we've been doing these webinars now for 9 weeks, and we've been tracking this data for 9 weeks. So we are at a point now where we're able to really look at the trends across this time period. And what we're showing you this week, as I said, 9 weeks. So we've broken this data into thirds, and you'll see the first third of our quarantine stay-at-home period, that March 16th to April 3rd. The second third would be basically the month of April 6th-ish to about April 24th. And then the most recent 3-week period, which took us from the end of April through this week. And the trends to note. The number of organizations significantly behind plan has increased over the duration of this quarantine period. However, you'll note that that green bar, which is reflecting the last 3 weeks, has been consistently hovering about the 60% mark. So, in terms of a trend, what that's telling us is over the past 3 weeks, it's not really getting any worse. In fact, last week we were just over 60%. This week we're just under 60%. So it's holding steady and perhaps even getting a little bit better. The other trend that I want to point out is that there are some organizations that are ahead of plan, either slightly or significantly. So we do know that there are organizations that are doing well right now. And those are small numbers, but you'll see that the numbers for those slightly ahead of plan are somewhat tight and close within a couple of percentage points of each other. And that number of organizations that are significantly ahead of plan is somewhat increasing. But what we're talking about this week is pricing pressure. And the price pressure is real. So in preparing for this session, we wanted to understand the impact of price pressure on B2B organizations. So in our survey this week, we asked whether the pressure to lower prices is an issue for our respondents. 75% of you said yes, 23% of you said no, 2% indicated that it's not applicable. And that means that you have a fixed price. So the pressure to change your price just doesn't apply here. So with that baseline, we asked how much price pressure our respondents have experienced in the last month. So since the beginning of the COVID-19 situation, 23% of you indicated it is significant. It's been a significant issue. 51% of you said it's been moderate. 21% of you are not having any price pressure. 6% said not applicable. And in this case, that means they've not been able to actively sell. So then we asked how much price pressure you all anticipate to expect through the end of this year, so through the end of 2020. 43% said significant, 57% said moderate, and you'll notice that no one indicated there would be no price pressure or that it wasn't applicable. So the price pressure is real, it's happening, you expect it to continue and even increase.
Michelle, I just add from my forum, it's interesting that the reasons the customers are asking, some are asking because of their need. They see that their business is down. They need some support to help with just them as an ongoing business. Sometimes they're asking because they recognize that you as a provider, your demand is down, and so therefore you may be a little hungrier. And then the third reason it was given was your raw materials may be going down. They're following the cost of oil. It's gone down. Therefore, they expect you to pass along those savings. So customers are being very focused in terms of why they are asking, and it just means your sales teams have to be better prepared.
Exactly, you're 100% correct. We did ask, what are their most common stated reasons for asking for a discount? And much of what you're hearing and I'm hearing in our forums also played out in our surveys. Cash flow. Our organization's customers are having competitive problems, budget reductions, shutdowns, their business and their profits shrinking margins. There was one comment which I appreciated, which said, you know, their customers are saying, please share our pain. If we're going to take a hit, we need you to take a hit as well. And then there are some who are saying that they're not necessarily getting asked for discounts, but they're being asked for payment terms. So instead of saying net 30, customers are asking for net 60, 75, 90, even 120. So some different ways of approaching that as well. And definitely the lower cost of raw materials as well. Others also said that it was oftentimes a case of keeping a project or a sale alive. So either you lower the price now and make the sale, or it gets forced to delay indefinitely. So it's a way of getting that business in. One other thing I wanted to note is we did ask on average what the discount percentage was that was typically requested from customers, and 65% said that their customers were asking for anywhere between a 5 to 15% discount. And then 11% said less than 5%, and another 13% said more than 15%. So it looks like that main discount percentage falls in that 5 to 15% range.
Michelle, we had a question. Someone asked what the expected price pressures were from that previous graph. I believe it was 43% said significant and 57% said moderate.
Yes, that is correct. And I just flipped the slide back so you could get another look.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So a word from our sponsor, Russ. Could you tell us a little bit about the Brooks Sales Leadership Forum?
Sure. We continue to promote this because we believe it's an important way for people to get real-time information from their peers. And so a couple other topics we talked about this week included things like changes in your customer base, that they're maybe moving to certain industries or certain kind of companies, because they believe over the long haul they're going to be the ones that can sustain them. A lot of conversation about 80-20, right? I may get 80% of my revenue or 80% of my profits out of 20% of my customers. So those are the ones I really need to care for. Also, we talked about LinkedIn profiles. What's the right thing to put in a LinkedIn profile to be able to create a good impression when you're scheduling a meeting, as opposed to creating and starting off a poor impression and starting off on the wrong foot. So again, if you're looking for somebody that can, or a group that can share information, you can bring your problems, you can help them work through theirs, just email us at forum@thebrooksgroup.com, and we'll be glad to get you into a group. We also have a special request this week. We're trying to get some information about the viewers here on our webinar. And so Michelle, I think you've got a couple of quick poll questions for people.
I do, and we'll have Nicole tee those up. Russ and I have been doing these webinars, as I've already said, nine weeks in a row now, and we made a commitment up front to be here every week for as long as you wanted to be with us, and as long as the situation warranted and we could bring valuable information to you. We are getting ready to come into the summer season, and so what we'd like to find out is from you all, our viewers, how often would you like to hear from us? Weekly, twice per month, monthly, quarterly? And then during the summer, what is the best day for attending these webinars? And we've got some days of the week there to show you as well.
And you might have to scroll down because, at least for me, I only see the first 2 days of the week. So.
Yes, you are correct. So you may have to scroll down on that poll, but we would very much like to hear your input. And while folks are voting, I did also want to mention that we have another webinar opportunity coming up on May 28th. We will be doing a program on leading your team through reopening, tools for connecting and persuading. So if you're interested in attending this webinar, there will be a fee for that. Please be sure to email us at webinar@thebrooksgroup.com. And again, that's leading your team through reopening, tools for connecting and persuading. So we know that coming into this, the new environment, once businesses really are back on their feet and reopening, things are going to be different. We've all talked about that next normal. So tools for connecting and persuading. If you're interested, please be sure to email webinar@thebrooksgroup.com.
All right. Thank you all for your input into the poll, Nicole. We can close that and let's move on. Thank you very much. Friday clearly the winning day in terms of the day that people want to attend, and um, very close on frequency, but between twice a month, weekly, and monthly. So let's talk best practices. As we move on and look at the the ways in which you can engage with customers, the most important thing of all, you need a clear strategy. And that starts with defining who your best customers are. And your best customers, by the way, are not always the ones who do the most volume with you. Look at things like profitability. Look at how quickly they're growing. Look at relationship quality in terms of how well committed you are to them and how they are to you. And also the market power of that particular organization. I was reminded in preparing for this that I sat in a sales meeting one time, and the man in charge of our major accounts talked about how we had a great relationship with a specific account, even though it was an account who very frequently demanded a discount without giving any volume or anything back in exchange. And also when they asked for a new product, were very slow to approve those, even though it was usually tied to cost reductions. They would take the cost reduction before approval. They were not a good partner. And so define what the best customers are for you. Best strategy for pricing: think, flex, don't give. The incentives or the strength right now is about dropping prices, but realize it's hard to raise prices in a growing economy. If 6 months from now or 12 months from now, as things start to get better, you're still going to have hungry competition, and we just all know how difficult that is. So look for new or creative ways to be able to change things. Like, for example, maybe set up your discount so that it's share of wallet. The more they spend in your product or service category as a company, the greater your discount. Or maybe it's a future credit where purchases now are earning them future credits in the future, or back-end rebates are sometimes used in that as well. But try not to give anything once if you don't have to. And then the last piece to this clear strategy is make sure your comp plans are aligned, compensation plans. One of the big things that I see from this is oftentimes reps are not aligned with what the organization wants. And as a result, in the clients I consult with, very frequently, if a rep has control over what price point they go in with, they go in low on the price because they think that's what's going to win the deal. That's the fastest way to agreement. And it doesn't cost them anything. So a lot of the more sophisticated comp plans are looking at either new margins or sliding scale commissions based on what the net margins are. We also have seen some plans that are built around new customer capture, viewing new customer business maybe slightly more valuable than ongoing business. Again, depends on your industry and kind of what you're seeing. And if not, your sales reps, in terms of alignment, having your first level sales managers being rewarded or paid on margin is really good, because it, again, is going to help you align with whatever you want to accomplish as a company. Number two, from a best practices perspective, as you define these best customers, then really try and take a look at to understand what they're looking for. Who's going to be the customer that you think you're going to be doing with a year from now? We talked about this sort of idea of who the best partners are, but the word partner has been thrown around an awful lot. And to a lot of people, partner means, that we want to collaborate and sell you a bunch of stuff. And so now you're going to find out who are the ones that are willing to work with you. Try to avoid entering into long-term contracts at super low prices right now. If you're in the hospitality industry, we've heard a lot of people repricing business. Try to keep those terms, if you do reprice, as short as possible for your particular businesses. When you get to that definition of best, you also need to look inside segments. There have been businesses where there's been a huge airlines, hospitality. Those are the groups right now seeing the biggest requests for discounts. Your number one goal, and this is according to McKinsey, and I would second it, is you need to learn to, or live to fight another day. And so just make the business sense, the business decisions that make sense. Try not to get locked into anything long-term. Another segment is seeing increasing demand. And if you're one of those players, you need to be careful that you're not perceived as price gouging. There's really ugly press lately about Amazon and some of their vendors who are charging a lot, or maybe PPE suppliers, especially PPE middlemen. The most important thing, if you're seeing that huge surge in demand, is operational issues, keeping the shelves full, keeping quality up. Those are your issues. You have the right to be able to go back to customers and say, look, we're adding a 10% charge, we're adding a 20% charge because that's what it takes us with new COVID requirements in our factories to keep the shelves full or to keep the quality up. And then if you've got a sort of this, you're in the middle, it's maybe lumpy or your demand is muted, those kind of clients be the best ones to work with. They're going to be opportunistic in the business they're seeking. You may have some ability to them to help them win alternative or additional business. You want to really make sure trust is important. At the Brooks, we talk about you really have two things to sell. That's trust and value. We talked about rapport with the client, helps build trust so that you can ask the questions to learn what they value. And never is that more important than now. If you try and offer a quick discount, it's going to raise prices about your stability as a business, or maybe have you been ripping me off? Trust comes from being consistent over time with the things that we do. I had a client one time when I was in business, and they said to me, we got into a negotiation and they needed some help. And they said, we really want to do business with you. But here's the issue I face. And they were able to talk about their internal pressures, what they looked like. We had enough of a trust relationship that we could then get creative about how we solve that problem. This is also a time, by the way, where business reviews, if you've been conducting them, are paying off, because all of those business review meetings allow you to get higher level executive contacts, allow you to be communicating your value, your strengths, and your weaknesses, and getting feedback on those. So if a normal cadence of business reviews is not a part of your business, you might want to look at, maybe not at this point, but getting them on the agenda for when things start back. And then finally, for best practices, one of the things we suggest is to create what's called a deal war room. What is that? It's a cross-functional team that has the authority to make decisions about all aspects of a deal. They can move allocations up or down. They can make decisions about pricing. They can look at whether you include or don't include free freight. They're looking across the business at a set of KPIs in terms of what are they winning, what's the deal size, when and where can we upsell. The goal of the deal war room, by the way, is not to slow down the transaction. Salespeople should bring a prepared deal and be able to, in one meeting, get approval to be denied or to look at enhancements in one quick call. It makes sure that if you're offering special terms in one part of the business, it's spread across all similar customers. It also drives consistency and discipline in your pricing. One of the things, for example, that we're seeing with deal war rooms, and this is according to a survey done by Sales Globe, is you do a better job of capturing value. They found deal war rooms reduce your sales time, your sales cycle, by anywhere from 35 to 40%. It enhances your sales productivity by 15 to 20%, and it can create a 5 to 10% higher ASP and invoice amount. So getting people into a room, having everybody there who can make the decision, especially if you're supply constrained, is very important. It also provides real-time market data to the people who are internal that you've always wanted to be able to share with those other departments what's really happening in the field. This is a good way to do it. These are the numbers, by the way, that I just quoted about deal war rooms are numbers that come from a historical average. This was not a survey that was taken in the last 8 weeks. So their ability to hold that 5 to 10% at this particular time, I'm not 100% sure of. Next, let's look at the dynamics of virtual negotiations. And I've got to speed up here a little bit. Most people are bad negotiators. Something like 80% of CEOs and managers, when tested, leave money on the table. So what are people doing right now? Well, from our survey, we're seeing that they're coming out with lower cost products, maybe a lower cost product line or service. Second most popular option right now is people are standing their ground on discounts. And by the way, all of these are sort of less than 30% of the overall survey audience. Removing or reconfiguring the proposal. And then the two worst options, which show up at 4 and 5, are splitting the difference or giving just the discount that's requested. And we all know that for every dollar or percentage point we give up in the deal, it goes immediately to the bottom line. They come from failure to really understand. And there's two concepts here that Northwestern University teaches on. One is the fixed pie perception, which says, I believe that the other person's interests, in this case, the buyers, are directly opposed to those of the sellers. But survey after survey says the most critical issue for companies is not price. It's things like supply. It's things like quality. It's things like the reputation of the company that's providing them. So don't just go in assuming that we are adversaries. You're trying to figure out on a lot of variables where you're going to go. And the problem with split the difference, or as Northwestern calls it, satisficing, is that you get to a race to an agreement. There is a negotiation exercise called the Batmobile, where two people come together to buy a used car. One is selling, one is buying. And the car has a scrap value of a certain amount. It turns out that if you move quickly to make a decision, usually you end up with a suboptimal deal, because what happens is the buyer is really looking just to purchase the door, and the scrap value of the automobile is exactly the same whether it has a door or doesn't have a door. And so it takes time to be able to optimize to get to that right perception. But the number one thing it starts with is not accepting the very first proposal. We'll talk about where you go from there. Number two, negotiations are more difficult to do virtually. Online, we are not our best selves. There is less trust that's been found in surveys, and people tend to have lower moral behavior. That's right, we lie online. We've learned that from probably time with social media. I have not been involved, but I understand that's common in dating profiles if you're in that particular demographic. But also we confront in a more negative basis online, which creates more understanding. So how do we make it better? Here's 3 quick points. Number 1, try to have a short personal connection beforehand. These, by the way, are backed by research out of Northwestern. Even a 3 to 5 minute phone call where you're just connecting personally before you do the negotiation improves outcomes drastically, is what the data says. Because now I'm negotiating with a person, not just with an image on the screen. Number 2, it's okay to verbalize the challenge. Say, look, this is not an ideal place to have this. We're online. I know that people aren't necessarily their best selves online. So go ahead and name it before you start. And then last, use voice and video. Research from Northwestern says that the use of video decreases impasse in negotiations from 22% if you're just using voice to 4% if you're using voice and video. And Gong.io did a survey of deals and found that video is used 41% more in the deals you win than the deals you lose. And then the last piece, that just to take a quick look, is how do we capture value? Value always starts with understanding, discovering what they value. It starts at the very beginning of the sales cycle. It's all built around trust. If I don't trust you, I am not going to share information with you. And it's also about how do we use our sales skills in a different way. I used the analogy this week that salespeople now have to go from being people who are doing framing construction to doing finished carpentry. It's maybe the same tools in the toolbox, but it's using them in a different way. You've got to really increase your patience to learn what people really need. You've got to believe that most problems are not solved by price. In fact, sometimes dropping your price can just have a negative impact. You need to focus on value. What are the important things that add value to them? For example, if you're in lighting and you're working with a contractor, that contractor is looking for a good price, but the other point is what happens if they don't get the supply and it changes, what's the cost to them if a crew gets mishandled or misscheduled or is down for a day, or what happens when there's a problem and they have to go back to the business owner or the homeowner and replace that. So make sure you're capturing all of that value, especially free services. We're hearing from customers who usually do some consulting work up front and are struggling with now being able to get paid for that. Make sure it's communicated when you're adding that value. McKinsey also, by the way, says that this may be a time where you need to refresh the sales skills your team has around negotiation, around pricing discussions, and around value selling training. And of course, at the Brooks Group, we'd be glad to talk to you about that. It's also about asking the right kinds of questions. A recent poll I saw said that 59% of people fail in negotiations because they don't ask the right questions. They haven't discovered what's of value. Somewhere research tells us between 10 and 12 open-ended questions do work in a meeting to get you the information you want. If you are asking closed-ended questions, it's about half that. But take your time, don't rush, understand what they really want before you make the proposal. One of the dynamics they found is that when we are in person, we use charisma in a different way than we use it when we're online. In person, our voice, our gestures, our stature, our mannerisms, how we read body language, all of those come into play. But when we're online, we lose a lot of that. And so it comes down now more to the ideas and to the content that we are presenting. And so we're being judged more not on how dramatic are we in presenting it or how well do we read the other person, but have I really listened and connected the dots? Generic proposals now are worse than any other time. And finally, collaboration is really the key. Getting the buyer involved in the process. You can't win a negotiation on the first question, but you can sure lose it. So ask questions like, how am I supposed to do that when they ask for a price decrease? Or how can we work together to achieve that level of pricing? Recognize that buyers want to report back to their management chain that they got a good deal. So help them be able to communicate how they got a good deal back to their managers. And make sure you're able to come back and communicate value, bring back past conversations, et cetera. Seek for the real customer need and solve it. If a buyer walks into a car dealership and says, I want a four-wheel drive, you're not ready to take them to a specific vehicle yet because you don't know whether I want that four-wheel drive because I want to do an endurance race through the desert or because I want to take my large family skiing and therefore I want comfort. So you've got to keep asking the questions and not making assumptions. Right now, the big things we're seeing from survey data, clients are looking for supply chain assurance. Am I really going to get what I want, especially if some things are being manufactured overseas? Can you help me protect my inventory? I'm seeing these wild swings. Is now a good time to discuss concepts like vendor managed inventory? Or is now a good time where, you know, I'll look at this, but my people are really slammed. So how can you optimize either training or retraining on this particular product? Realize that every buyer is different. Those are kind of the key ideas. We'll open up the Q&A. If you've got a question, please either chat it to us or pop it up in the Q&A format. I see we did get a request. The work on trust online comes out of both some work that was done at Northwestern University here in the US, a professor by the name of Dr. Lee Thompson. Lee is L-E-I-H. So you can look for her research online. I also saw that, if you just give me a minute, I'll find it in my notes and we can get it out to you, but it probably came from McKinsey. They've been a source of a lot of this information. Other questions or thoughts on the pricing and how to work with it?
Russ, we did get a comment from one of our participants on business reviews, which you mentioned just a few minutes ago. Business reviews are powerful, but often something sales reps try to avoid. It really needs to be pushed from the top down.
Great point. And one of the points I always make is usually in a business review, the relationship isn't perfect. The vendor has failed in some way to deliver maybe everything they promised, and they don't want to go in and have to admit that. But I always say, you know what, if you're not willing to admit your mistakes and shortcomings, your competitors are more than willing to walk in and ask questions and talk about those. So trust is about owning it. It's about stepping up when you're doing all the good right things and when you're doing most of the right things and some that come up short. So yes, sales managers, leaders, business reviews are a great way to understand how well the partnership is going, as well as to be able to get early access into information that may be shortcoming the partnership as time goes on.
Great point, Russ. I think as a sales leader, you would certainly want to know early enough if there were issues. As much as salespeople maybe don't like to have those conversations, it's better to surface them early when you can do something about them than find out too late.
Yeah.
Any additional questions? Oh, we do have one.
Yeah, a question came up about, what do you recommend for sales managers if their teams are just dropping prices? Here's my recommendation. Maybe what you can do short term and long term. In the long term, obviously realigning comp plans around net margin is better, so that you're holding, they're suffering some of that pain as well. In the short term, what you can do is go through very clear value analysis. We use a tool we call the value formula. Why should someone buy from you specifically over why shouldn't they? To understand how strong your value case is. So a sales manager can ask a rep when they're asking for a discount, I need to understand your value case. Why, what are we bringing to this deal? Why are we going to win, or why wouldn't we win? And if the answer is like, well, we don't really know, it's a toss-up, they may need to go back and do a little more work in the account to understand what's really important. That, to me, if it's a toss-up, it usually means they haven't really sourced the key value. Different on RFPs, by the way, that's a totally different, or RFQs. But if you're selling face-to-face and it's a toss-up, means you haven't really discovered that value. The other thing is that idea of a sales war room. Bring the sales war room idea in so that other people can see. They bring some consistency. My experience is that reps have a pattern. Certain reps like to give up price more than others. And so bringing them to a sales room at somewhat kind of a threshold of whatever your deal threshold size is, gives you a chance to review that and see, and to bring some consistency across that. Question about the war room. It says, what if a manufacturing setting, we have a choice between winning the order today at a discounted price versus likely losing the order at normal pricing? Isn't this situation? Yes, it is. But here's where a war room plays into that. Usually the person who believes they're closest to losing the deal is the person closest, the salesperson. And they can come to the war room and make the case. Sales management is there as well. The war room is not about stopping deals from going forward. It's just making sure you've asked all those questions. And if they determine that it's win the deal today, or at a low price, or lose it at normal pricing, they have the ability to say, go ahead. And if they're seeing that across lots of deals, they understand this is something that's going on. If you only have one rep or one segment, they're going to ask the question, what's unique about this rep or segment that's causing that? Or this customer maybe, and being able to understand the broader picture. So it's just a way to make more intelligent, more informed communications. There are times where you take a deal at a price that you're not thrilled with. That's part of the nature of the business that we have. But we want to do that kind of as rarely as possible, and still not hurt the overall business. Next question that came in is, how do we keep online meeting participants engaged? So often there's silence, it's hard to gauge. You're right, a lot easier to read the room. It's part of why this virtual approach is tough. We recommend smaller meeting sizes. We recommend that cameras be turned on so that you can get that video feedback. And then as the presenter, you've got to spend a lot more time going back and forth to them. In our normal programs, we believe every 8 or 9 minutes, we've got to go to an exercise. Online, it's about 4 minutes, which means for every point you make or every slide you present, you have to ask a question, not just, is that clear? Or, can I help you understand? But there has to be something where you see a connection between what you've just presented and where it works. Maybe it's something like, Maria, we talked last week about X. I believe this solves the problem. Could you tell me how you see this working in your environment? So you've got to really connect the dots more with their particular needs and get them talking. Question came in about how do we deal with existing customers under margin pressures? Everybody is, and are asking for discounts on committed annuities. Should we wait for them to approach us? Should we be proactive? Could you add soft value but won't be able to give discounts? we touched on earlier what people are doing when they face these situations in terms of either a low price product line or reconfiguring it. Adding more services is a benefit. And so if there is a way for you to do that and it makes economic sense, always better to hold the price, give the services on a temporary basis, and then back up. If they have to have it now due to margin pressure that they're seeing, ask for the trade-off. We teach in our classes what we call give to get. If I'm going to give up something, what do I get back? Are they going to lengthen the term of the agreement? Will they discuss a time where maybe it's a neutral point where we go back to normal pricing? Try to explore ways in which you can both win through this. You can win if maybe there's more volume. You can win if they'll give you access to other departments or other parts of their company, depending upon how big that is. Maybe you're the second supplier. You can do that if he'll give you a bigger share of wallet. Just explore a lot of the deal ramifications as opposed to just price. If you're just focused on price, the number is either goes up, it goes down, or it doesn't move at all. But if you explore those other options, it can be there. And I really would encourage you to ask that question that says, I understand that you're under margin pressure. We're under margin pressure as well. How can we together come up with a solution that we can achieve your goals, in a win-win situation? And then sit back, shut up, and let the buyer talk. Most buyers, if you've got a good relationship, are going to work with you to understand how to solve the issue. Any other questions?
While we're waiting to see if any additional questions come in, next week's topic will be, is your sales team right, ready, and resilient to win in 2020? So that'll be next week's topic. And if you're interested in our webinar on leading your team through reopening, tools for connecting and persuading with emotional intelligence, because I left that part out earlier, that is on May 28th, and you can email us at webinar@thebrooksgroup.com.
Let me just add one other point. Pricing is hard. There is always pressure from customers. Price always figures into the purchase. I just want to say that what we're trying to do is have some tools so that when faced with a price request, rather than just immediately give up that percentage as profit, there are more intelligent ways to work with your client to try and minimize that. Sometimes you have to give up price. I understand that. But make it a dialogue, not a threat, I guess is the best way to put it. Have a conversation, see if you can get to something that's win-win.
Excellent point. And I believe there we will end. So we will see you next Friday. Again, is your sales team right, ready, and resilient to win in 2020? And we want to thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.